one of the other things that you're going to see, and you're going to see this possibly in a practical exercise, is configuring a security topology. And it's not going to be this exact way, but one of the things that you need to configure to consider when wanting to secure a network are some of the following things. How many of you guys here have heard of a DMZ before? Between North and South Korea, that stretch of land is called a DMZ, and that's sort of no man's land. And when you talk about internet and network security, it's much the same way. Yeah. So a DMZ, it's sort of the end of no man's land. It's that space between your company's network and the open internet. Another term that you'll see, and I don't believe you'll see it on the Security Plus, but it's a good term to know, is something called a demarcation point. And it's at that point in your network where your responsibility for the data sent ends and where your ISP picks that up. So typically your demarc point in the home network is going to be your cable modem. For the Security Plus, you don't need to know a ton of the map behind it, but subnetting, you're in essence taking a block of private IP addresses that you have, and you're setting up separate subnets to help better classify your network. Think about subnetting as, think about your whole network as a big old pie. You're going to cut out, about a quarter piece, and that'll be, hey, we're going to cut out this piece of the pie for our production network. You're going to carve out a section of your IP address range for your production network. Then you're going to go, well, we need to put finance and HR on their own little subnet for compliance reasons. So we're going to push them out there. It's really just breaking up a network into smaller, more manageable pieces. And typically, you're going to see subnetting come into a thing with VLANs, or virtual local area networks. And that's, again, where you see this a ton with switching, where if you're running cables from offices back to a switch, you're going to configure a VLAN for each of those different departments. Another thing is going to be figuring out remote access. Well, for remote access, if you're contracted by another company to do IT support, one of the common things that's going to be set up is that you need to be able to remote into a device. So for instance, if your company contracts Cyber Protex to be your IT managed services provider, typically we're going to load an agent or something on your machine that allows us to remote in from here, so that way we can remotely manage your machine, and we don't, you don't have to be billed for someone coming on site, or especially today in the COVID-19 world where people might be concerned about having someone come on site that they don't know about. So network address translation, what do you guys think that is? Just from those three words. What is it that runs over port 53? Similar. So DNS, it will translate the IP address of a web server to a domain, such as google.com to, let's just say Google decides to have 193.248. Blah, blah. So NAT does a similar thing to that, but instead what they're doing, so you were a little right when you're talking about converting IPv4 to IPv6. That's a way you can do that, but typically you're not going to see NAT used with IPv6. And I'll explain that here in a moment. NAT, what it does, is it converts private IP addresses to publicly routable IPs. So if you were to go home on your home network and open up Windows command prompt and use the command ipconfig, you're going to get a 192.168, a 10 address, something like that. But if you go and you Google what's my public IP, it's going to give you a different address. And part of it is because IPv4, there is a limited space. IPv4, all of the publicly routable addresses have been taken up. NAT has been set up to kind of keep breathing life into IPv4 so that everyone can access the internet. Now, with IPv6, you're not going to see NAT used, because IPv6, it's going to generate a publicly routable IP address based upon the MAC of your device. Another thing that needs to be taken into account is voice communications. So with that, that's going to be allowing access over the network for Microsoft Teams, Skype, WebEx. And the last one is very simply network access control. And that's thinking through how people are going to access your network. It's going to be, are they connecting to a wireless access point? Are they wiring into the wall? Are they wiring to a switch? And thinking through that.